great, not only the great artifacts of Western civilization, but also one of the great religious texts of the Catholic Church. But sadly, all collections have their fate, and in 1987, the Catholic Church decided to sell the entire collection, including her Gutenberg Bible. And hence, the Bible was on the move again, and the Bible was sold at this unbelievably high-profile auction. This was on the front page of the New York Times. It was in Life magazine. It was in literally every major newspaper around the world. The sale took place on October 22, 1987. And Scott, I know you remember that just October 19th of 1987 was the gigantic global financial panic, what we know today as Black Monday. Remember that? When the Dow Jones stumbled 25%. It was like the biggest loss.
Right, yeah.
A staggering panic resulted. I think it was called like a world shaking global financial panic is, no exaggeration. So, of course, the auction at Christie's, they were terrified that no one would show up to bid on rare books and a Gutenberg Bible in the middle of, the worst financial panic we had seen in decades. And boy, were they wrong. It was a packed house, standing room only. Dealers and collectors from all over the world descended on Christie's to watch this historic moment. And Estelle's Bible sold for about $5.4 million, this one volume of the Gutenberg Bible. At the time, it was the highest price ever paid for a single book. It turned out to be 70 times what Estelle Doheny had paid for it in 1950. So it did show in a way her shrewd mind for the bottom line, that this rather modest investment could turn into such a colossal fortune. In the end, the total of her complete book collection was almost $40 million. I believe the exact number was $37.8 million for her rare books. So it nearly matched the colossal value in the very end of Edward Doheny's oil empire. So she proved herself very much a fantastic businesswoman, a fantastic collector. And Scott, I would argue that she was the greatest American book collector yet. She's not a household name. We don't know her. And there's no question she was the greatest woman book collector of her generation. No question at all.
What were some of the things that she accomplished that you think makes her worthy of that title of collecting and preserving and organizing her books? Her collection really contains some of the finest, most important Bibles of different versions, different years. Many of them were pre-Gutenberg, so they were the illuminated Bibles. And some of them were some of the odd Bibles, the Vinegar Bible, Bibles where names had been misspelled, just kind of fun Bibles. But also, she also collected books that had intrinsic deep cultural value in America. She collected many of the great manuscripts of Mark Twain. One of the great stories is Mark Twain had inscribed one of the books to his wife, Livy. That's very personal and, actually sold for quite a bit of money. She'd bought many books from the Kelmscott Press, staggering array. I mean, any library would give their eye teeth to have this collection of rare Bibles, Western artifacts, popular authors, as I mentioned, like Mark Twain. And she also had many additional items, letters, papal indulgences that you mentioned that were believed to have been printed by Gutenberg. It really scanned the gambit. And it's kind of hard to believe that the Catholic Church would unload all of this precious material, especially that had a religious nature attribute to it. And is it after this sale when the book heads to Japan?
That's right. So the party that purchased the book at auction on the telephone, so you can imagine this was a very high stakes, very tense moment. was a publishing conglomerate. It was Mazarin, sort of the Simon and Schuster of Tokyo, Japan. Very, very famous, very a lucrative publishing enterprise known as Mazarin Publishing. And so with great fanfare, the book returned, went on its next journey across to Asia. So now the book, imagine, has traveled from Germany to the UK to Los Angeles, now to Tokyo, where it was put on display and long lines of people came to see it. And then after a few years, it was donated to Keio University in Tokyo, which is an amazing, sort of like the Harvard of Japan, a very prestigious, esteemed university. So today the Bible is locked in a steel vault at Keio University in Tokyo.
Hey everyone, Scott here. One more brief word from our sponsors. And this is an aside. You'll have to indulge the strange things that pop into my mind. But when I was imagining the Bible being transported, I could imagine an Ocean's 11 type of heist attempt or cat burglar thing. So Do you know anything about the security protocol of basically Bradley fighting vehicles and armored tanks to protect it as it's going from place to place?
Oh my gosh. Well, the best story was when Estelle was having the Bible shipped after she managed to buy it secretly in 1950. She was so terrified that the book would be stolen, or would be, as you said, grabbed, by some terrorist or something. So she gave it a code word. And the code word was commode. And she, of course, meant commodious, like a commode for, was more of a traditional word for an antique chest of drawers. I don't think she understood that commode also referenced a toilet. But it's interesting, in all the telegrams, she required the strictest secretly. So she'll telegram the shippers, inquiring if commode has successfully left New York Customs. Yes, the commode has successfully left New York Customs. And they tracked it, and of course she did everything she could to insure it. But when you have something that's considered priceless, it's like insuring the Mona Lisa, no amount of money could protect it or could replace it. It's irreplaceable. But the security precautions were quite something. I mean, and when the book was sent from Camarillo Library, at St. John's Seminary, to Christie's, the auction house, quite an elaborate security protection. The books were driven, all the way to New York, and of course, they had multiple drivers, so the trucks wouldn't have to sit on the road anywhere. There were, other than stopping for gasoline, there would be no layovers. But there was no question that transporting the Gutenberg Bible is no less than a mission impossible, and required great feats of organization, sort of a military exercise to protect the book. And then, of course, how do you wrap a Gutenberg Bible? How do you protect it in the shipping process? And it was kind of fun to see over the years how many different techniques they used. In the end, it's sort of wrapped in white sheets, wrapped in foam rubber, placed inside of a wood crate. The crate is then drilled shut, and then that's placed inside of another crate with a padded interior. And in fact, they were so worried about it when it, I believe it traveled on TWA, if I'm not mistaken, another one of our airlines no longer with us. I'm sorry, it's with American Airlines. Now I remember, it was American Airlines, and they told American Airlines they wouldn't disclose what was in the traveling crate other than it was, quote, high value cargo.
Probably for the best.
Better that way.
Yeah, you don't get anyone's interest in there.
Exactly.
I'd like to, now that we've seen the story of where this book goes, to look at the book not as an object being passed from person to person, but as a subject. And the nature of owning a Gutenberg changes, as you described, where up into somewhere in the late 19th century, a private owner could somewhat reasonably afford it as long as you were wealthy. It's not priceless yet. A simple book lover or someone who wanted to outfit their library could purchase it for the love of book and for a religious object as well. But then in the 20th century, it changes where it becomes this ultra rare item. There is a bidding war. There's an arms race. Its value has multiplied by hundreds, by thousands. The cynical way that one could look at that is it's part of a pricing bubble, like tulips in Holland in the 1600s when people paid an insane amount for something that we get down to it is essentially worthless. Or today with a year and a half ago with cryptocurrency and Bitcoin when people went insane buying something that literally does not exist. So a cynic could say, well, it's arbitrary what it is. People just are simply chasing after status. It could be a Gutenberg Bible. It could be a tulip. It could be this or that. The optimistic view could say that maybe the Bible is an agent, this particular book, and it's had a positive impact on those who've owned it, that as an item of conspicuous consumption, it has, I don't know, shown the intrinsic value of literacy. I don't know. So what is your take on this book as a subject, that it is this object, the earliest printed work that is so valuable and not something else? What's your take on this book's story?
It's one of those kind of amorphous things where you wonder why and how it developed sort of this superstar status. I mean, it's considered the greatest book in the world, no question about it. And for the rich and the super rich, the pursuit of a significant book, money is no object. It becomes a symbol of status. It becomes a symbol of intellect. And especially as its star trajectory continued to rise, and only the super, super rich could afford it, it became the greatest status symbol of all. There's no doubt that today the Gutenberg Bible could only be owned by the super, super rich or an institution or a library. And our own Library of Congress was so smart to buy the Gutenberg Bible that they did. This was a very famous acquisition. And, the Gutenberg Bible in the Library of Congress is very rare. It's 3 volumes and printed on white pigskin. So you can only imagine within the price tag of the existing Gutenbergs, imagine what a 3-volume Gutenberg printed, and bound in white pigskin at the Library of Congress is worth today. It certainly would exceed $100 million for that 3-volume artifact. But there's something about it that connects with the human condition, that this invention of Gutenberg's changed the course of history, defined everything that came after it, accelerated all levels of human endeavor. I mean, this is not an exaggeration to say that Gutenberg's invention changed the world. And to have a piece of this very process and to understand it in detail and to own it, what could be a greater symbol of power, intellect, and history than that?
Right. Well, thank you for sharing all this with us, and perhaps one of the best traceable stories we have of an object that has existed continuously. So if people want to check it out, your book is The Lost Gutenberg, the astounding story of one book's 500-year Odyssey. And I don't believe it's available in vellum, but it is in typical book formats. But the collector's edition will hopefully come out available in that format. So Margaret, thank you for joining us.
Oh, Scott, thank you. I loved it. Thanks again.
So that is the episode for today. As always, I want to thank the Knowlton's Rangers, especially our spy masters, Josh Reddick, Baron Fraser, Chris from Maine, Carl from Norway, Moondoggy from Ohio, Rick Knowlton, Vic and Irene, Mike from New York, Michelle, and Marlene. I'll explain what that is in a second. If you like the show and want to help it grow, there are 4 easy ways for you to do it. 1, like and subscribe to the show on the podcast player of your choice. This helps spread the word about the show. 2, join our Facebook group. Here we can keep the discussion going about new episodes, and you can talk about what you like and didn't like. And you can find this group if you just search for History Unplugged on Facebook. 3, we have an online store with t-shirts, phone covers, and other accessories featuring awesomely bad history puns that were crowdsourced by you, the audience. And you can find that if you go to teespring.com/stores/history-unplugged. That's teespring.com/stores/history-unplugged. 4, and this is really the best way to dive deep with History Unplugged, and that's to become one of the Knowlton's Rangers. If you know your American history, you know the Knowlton's Rangers were an elite spy and reconnaissance group in the American Revolutionary War, but it's also the name of the membership program of History Unplugged.